Hi, I'm Linda,
I'm Ed, the
the
Dream
Dream
Team.
Team. We're talking today about closing costs. What are closing costs? We have buyers and sellers that don't really understand what closing costs are, and they ask us all the time, what are they? What's the difference? So, we want to talk about that today. We want to give you some answers.
The first one, the sale price. On whose side is it on? The buyer's or the seller? Did you answer both? You're right.
Bling.
That's it. It's a credit to the seller, debit to the buyer.
That's right. See, so both.
That's
You would
it.
see that on the closing statement on both sides. Now, the second is earnest money. Whose side would the earnest money be on? Now, keep in mind this earnest money was submitted when this offer first got underway. This was something that the buyer gave that says to the seller, I am so serious about your house. I want to buy it, and here's some earnest money that says that. So, on the closing costs, on the closing statement, whose side would that be on, as a debit or as a credit? If you said on the buyer side as a credit, you were right. It would be a buyer credit. That earnest money goes toward them paying off the amount of their home, that home or closing costs they may have. The next thing is a tax proration. Well, we know that taxes are paid in arrears. What that means is they are paid from last year. See, if you lived in a house from 2019, now we're in 2020, you're paying for last year's taxes. So when you buy that house, say you bought it in 2020, then the seller, they lived in it in 2019, so they have to pay those taxes up all the way to the day that they sell you that house. See, so that's going to be a debit on whose side and a credit on whose side? If you said it's going to be on both sides on the closing statement, you were correct. It's going to be a debit on the seller side because they have to pay it, but it's going to be a credit to the buyer because they have to receive it. So it's going to be your credit as a buyer, your debit as a seller on the closing statement. That's part of the closing costs.
Title charges. Would you say the seller or the buyer? If you answer both, you're right. You see, the seller pays his part to search for liens for him to sell the house. The buyer pays for deed prep, recording fees, so both.
Yes, absolutely. And remember, the title company is the one that's hosting the close. They're the one that's making sure that everything is legalized on both sides. They're going to make sure that the buyer gets a clean property with no liens or nothing owed on it, that the seller has paid that all off, and the seller's going to make sure, they're going to make sure that the seller gets money from the lender. It's going to be ready money. They're going to cut those checks at close. So everything's going to go smoothly. It's going to be legalized by the title company. So both the buyer and the seller are going to have some title costs. That's only fair because the title company is the host. The next thing then is lender fees. Who pays the fees for the lender? If you said the buyer, you were correct. Because remember, it's the buyer that's getting the loan. So they're going to have fees from the lender for the cost of that loan. So that's going to be part of the closing costs.
But now sellers can assist with that as well.
And why would a seller assist? Because they want to sell their home.
Yes.
And sometimes, often, a buyer has credit that they can get the lion's share of the loan, but they may not have a lot of cash in the bank. So the seller would say, oh yeah, I'm going to help you. I'll pay some of those closing costs. Now they're going to build it into the price of their home so that they still get what they need out of the sale of the home, but they're more than willing often to pay the buyer's closing costs. Now that's not a they have to do it. That is a seller concession. They have conceded or agreed to do that for the buyer so that they can sell that house. Okay, so those are just a general overview of some of the closing costs you will see on a closing statement.
Yes.
At the end of this, I'm going to have a sample closing statement so you can take a look at some of those charges, okay? Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye-bye.